Thank you. Well, yeah, I think Carla Celeste, it's actually now almost like a conversation that just continues. Um,
Yes.
but I think what we've seen is it's almost like everyone initially it's lockdown and what does it really entail. But I think what we saw in the communities was immediately that kind of hunger and the need for food, whether it's a food parcel, a soup kitchen. And I think sadly so, we actually said there's two things. It's almost as if the need for food was visible in your face very, very soon, right at the start of lockdown. And we were all like,
Mm.
but do people really live from hand to mouth? But I think what we underestimated is how many people actually live from the street. So it's while there's other people in the streets begging, literally getting food off the street, and now no one else is on the street, that actually just aggravated the whole thing of
Mm.
what we would say, poverty. So I think COVID in many cases, for a lot of us in many different areas probably, but it just highlighted the stuff that we already knew that's there with regards to unemployment, children and adults, families living off the street or that's making ends meet through begging.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think initially, and the whole response at the moment still is very much focused on food relief, it is a real need. I can't, say that it's not. Unfortunately, I think we've all seen it and maybe exposed to it a little bit in different ways. The food parcel issue seems to be a bit of I almost want to say, when I look at it broadly, it's, you get different people that would look at different solutions for the same problem. So, okay, people don't have food, families don't have food, especially in your low income communities. So it's showing the inequality. One family is buying and having all kinds of wonderful things on
Yeah.
Facebook, the others, yeah. So it's the
Yeah.
whole contrast almost
Yeah.
in everyone's faces. But yeah, food parcels has become a little bit political, so I'm just going to steer away from that. But I think government is trying either through food parcels or then the vouchers that they're also trying. But I think the whole principle there is this whole thing of it's very difficult to keep social distancing. So I
Mm.
think you might have seen that as well. And I mean, if we look at the TV, it's at the moment big sort of issues in terms of how do you manage and ensure that people are actually safe but still get food relief. So now it seems to me there's almost a little bit more of a shift towards supporting soup kitchens. So I'm not going to talk about Uviwe right now, but yeah, I think that is pretty much if you're in a community and you've been there before lockdown, you would rather support the local soup kitchen because they have been there. They will be there after all the crazy, if I may
Yeah.
call it like crazy food frenzy support because it's not sustainable. The way it's wonderful. I mean, I look in PE, how many food parcels through churches and just goodwill, people that's just putting it all together. It's amazing work, but
Yeah.
it's not a sustainable answer. So what I like, or what we've started to see is like in Seaview, either by Bikes and Gem projects, they started the vegetable garden. They started two soup kitchens. Now that is a sustainable way for
Mm.
me in terms of looking just at two small communities there by Seaview. So I think food relief is going to be a big issue still probably for another, one can't even say it's going to be for a long. Because I think Sheila, as the business chamber, you also realize 3-4 months into all of this, the economic impact is going to be felt even more probably than
Yeah.
right now. So I'm glad to see that food relief is maybe moving away from a little bit of, the immediate emotional give a food parcel approach to more how do we do it sustainable by rather getting donations and use money and fresh produce for the soup kitchens. Because then we can know they actually can manage the crowds, they can manage, little kind of neighborhoods almost.
Yeah.
So that's just maybe a comment that I wanted to make in terms of that. I think the other thing that we in the child protection sector, so I think whether you're in child protection or elderly or disabled, everyone is now, everyone kind of closed. If it wasn't a residential care facility where like a children's home or old age home, then everyone's program stopped. But the reality is, in our case, for instance, children, those children are even now more vulnerable in
Yeah.
terms of catching the virus because of overcrowding, not having meals, like your schools, even the feeding schemes.
Mm.
So in the nonprofit sector, what I see is more and more people are starting to say, okay, how do we gradually get, whether it's children or disabled or protected workshops, abused women, how do we get them back into the development programs that we're running? Now, obviously, as a nonprofit, the challenge is You want people to come back, but people might actually come back for the nutritional meal. So food is the whole time in the background, but you have to manage your numbers. So we, for instance, said at our creches, now, I mean, we're all going to listen later today what's going to happen in terms of the Department of Education. But if schools are not reopening and there's whatever happens with the schools, let me put it like that, we will probably open our 4 centers, which used to be a creche, a ECD center, and we'll call it child safe spaces. So we might have like almost like a rotational system where younger kids in the morning and older kids in the afternoon. Shall I continue, or do you want Taryn?
Yeah.
Thanks. So yeah, I think it's the whole thing of you want to get the most vulnerable people in the community back into a development program, back into a place where kids can benefit from a feeding scheme. But while you do that, you have to manage and clean your buildings, and there's obviously additional cost to that. So in terms of programs, there will probably be a gradual getting people back into what I'm just putting it all under one broad banner of development programs. The funding landscape, I think at the moment, almost what I jokingly said in the beginning is, obviously there's opportunities for immediate relief. What we have seen, unfortunately, and maybe it's not that, I don't know, fortunately, unfortunately, but depending the size of your nonprofit and your prior almost networking with a big funding role players like HCI Foundation, Lottery, or Solidarity Fund. Unfortunately, I'm just going to put it one side. There may or may not be a political affiliation attached to that, but I put that one side. But smaller role players like ourselves, local nonprofit, yeah, it's tough. It's difficult. We have not been successful with applications trying to get into bigger, food relief in terms of, donations. And I think, which I can understand, but they want to go for national organizations. So if they can actually get a national, food provider or national child protection organization, it's much easier from a large donor to run it like that than looking, historically like, you actually build capacity in small communities through local organizations. So yeah, I think all in all, in the nonprofit sector, there's definitely shifts for everyone taking place. I think we all see that in different ways across different sectors. So fundraising, my personal view is, and that is, I think where we've seen digital fundraising is going to be the way to go, not necessarily meet and greet and the same changes for business. So it's digital fundraising, sustainability, we're either going to make it or not. And I think from nonprofits, which I now realize it's not only nonprofits, it's businesses also don't have years of reserves. So yeah, it's a challenging game at the moment, but I think in terms of opportunity for small businesses to make a difference, then we will definitely see more opportunities for volunteers, keeping in mind it might actually also increase people's risks in terms of, stay at home versus volunteering, to have a sense of purpose. But I think in the nonprofit sector, there will be opportunity for more volunteers, and then food relief is still a big issue, a big need. If I can almost just put it all together like that.
I've muted myself, sorry. Okay, so, and specifically for Uviwe, the Relief, Restore, Renew, that rollout, if you can just tell us a bit more about that and what the future looks like for Uviwe.
Thanks, Carla. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to talk more specifically about Uviwe. I think your child protection, we've all seen it with gender-based violence. There were call center numbers and hotline numbers, but children, obviously, as parents are not able to make ends meet. There's more stress. We know how the cycle of abuse and poverty works. So as a child protection organization, our immediate almost phase then is what we call relief. So that is looking at physical needs. It's literally looking at children's nutritional food, a place, food per day, looking at safe spaces. That's why we want to actually open our centers up again, even if it's half day, but just to give some space for parents and children and in overcrowded houses specifically, and that we can actually also work with children in terms of stimulation. So our immediate, it's almost like a three-phased approach. Immediate relief is food, safety, security, and often in our communities, your caregivers are not necessarily the most nurturing people, even if it's a father or mother. So what we found is when the kids come back to a center, they actually have that loving relationship with an adult. So that's the three things that we focus on. Then and there's no dates to this, but probably 3-4 months and starting already, it's what we then call like the restore phase. So it's gradually getting children as well as youth back into programs, especially if the schools do, reopen, then we can actually continue with programs. And I think there is opportunity. So that's where in the longer term, what we then call we first thought, okay, it's about rebuilding, but then I think the more that we all hear, it's new normal. So gone maybe or rebuild, it's really renew, which is quite a challenge on a I almost want to say a thinking level. But yeah, we were looking at things like data, free data for all, internet access. So one of the big ticket sort of projects that we were looking at, and I think the virus COVID is just fast tracking that, is to actually look at a tech hub or like a computer resource center in Shorterville. Because the issue around unemployment for youth is not going to go away, it's just going to get worse. So crime, gangsterism, those kind of things that's always been there, it might just actually get more. So, but that's, if I say longer term, I think that's only going to get attention probably next year. So that's the phases in which we're trying to really just cope with the immediate need in the organization, then getting children back in safe spaces, because that is a big thing in terms of, the northern areas. But then to start looking at how do we engage with children to ensure safety, nutrition, and all of that in a new way.